Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic is, first of all, I'd like to thank Ministry of External Affairs and the organizers for having this summit at a very timely time when a lot of policy changes, the confusions, the doubts needs ironing when we are literally going at a faster pace into the digital way of doing commerce. And that is really leading us to a next platform because COVID, like I was talking while having coffee, made fence sitters shift to the e-commerce platforms. And that really added a huge number by 50% of jump in the people, whether it's a turnover, whether it's a business, or whether it's the number of people who are choosing as a consumer the first choice or the first visit point for any scrutiny of the elements or material they want to buy through the e-commerce platforms. So under this scenario, it is very, very important for us to understand that on date it may be constituting only 4% of the commerce, but then you never know as to the level it can reach because it is expected to reach 300 to 600 million dollars of the entire turnover of the business in just maybe 5 to 6 years. And that is where whether we are prepared, whether our policies are becoming facilitators. And why I'm saying so, the clarion call of the government is twofold. One clarion call is Make in India and Atmanirbhar. And second clarion call is the MSMEs export to enhance from 48 to 60%. Now, in this clarion call, is it possible to do it without e-commerce? My categorical answer is no. Gone are the days when you used to have buyer-seller meets or you used to have exhibitions outside. This enables you to display your product on a platform and get real-time feedback from the consumer. And that enables to decide your manufacturing chain, that enables you to decide your inventories, that enables you to decide how to enter the new markets, and that's what makes the whole difference. So under that scenario, I have got two experts with me. We have Abhijit Kamra, who is Director Global Trade with Amazon India, and we have Preetham Banerjee, who is consultant to ADB in the logistics sector. That's his expertise and his area. Before that, I'll just make one statement before I ask them to respond to some of the particular queries which I have in mind. One thing I'll say that let us come out that e-commerce is only for FMCG. Answer is no. Now metals are getting traded through e-commerce platform. The equipments, whether it is mining equipment or health equipments, they are getting traded, lent, sold through e-commerce platforms. So e-commerce is the way of going ahead. And if you always target to some of the companies, it is that it is not e-commerce, right? So there is a field for everybody, and that is what is very important when we go ahead. So first, Abhijit, I'll come to you. Now that we know that e-commerce is going in a very big way, and we are entering into the markets, and that's sort of a consumer choice, not just in metropolitan Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, even in rural India. So do you think that it will help to enter the export market, which is a government's target from 48 to 60% for MSMEs? How e-commerce can play a role to expand the market domestically and cross-border?
Thank you very much, Arunaji. I think probably there's never been a better time when MSMEs should think about exports. And that too, leverage e-commerce and other technology channels to build their export-oriented businesses. Because if I were to cross-reference some of the challenges that MSMEs typically face when they think about building export-oriented businesses, specifically from our country, I could classify them potentially into market access. Like you rightly said, typically, you'd have to fly down to one of these global exhibitions, set up a stall, if you wanted to be even considered to sell products to audiences across the globe. Now, on your mobile phone, in a couple of minutes, you can create an account, and that's market access. Second is market intelligence. A lot of times, there's a guesswork involved. As offline erstwhile exporters, you'd have to guess what the market demand for certain products is. At best, you would have experimented and you have a point of view. But now there's so much rich data available which would allow you to be very precise. It increases the probability of success. Third, I would say, is just efficient supply chains. Erstwhile, as an exporter, you need to put down fixed capital to shore up warehousing space, container space for logistics. Now it's all variable cost. You want to sell one product, you want to store one product for one day, you store one product for one day, and you pay for that one product for one day. And finally, I feel cross-border payments, which could be very overwhelming, and with the payment cycles as long as they are in exports, in a country like India where cost of capital is high, I think it's very important that you get your money quickly. And that's what technology and e-commerce is enabling. And in that manner, I very strongly feel it's A, democratizing how exports has been done. B, by reducing the entry barrier, it's making it more available for any MSME or any business owner who aspires to build an export-oriented business from India.
Very right. Taking question from you, and very rightly said, I'll just make one line comment. During COVID, the textiles in India, whether it was bed linens or whether it was towels, they literally captured the European and US markets. And it's all because of e-commerce. They displayed the product, they changed the colors. We love floral bed sheets, which is not very welcome in the Western world. So they changed their patterns, and they also came up with the USB of treating them with micro treatments so that you are COVID resistant or something like that. The truth of it, I don't know. But then, yes, they established themselves in the market. Now, taking cue from there, what he very rightly said about you can have a single product and not bother about the logistics. In December 18, there was a press release which reduced the percentage on the backward linkages, which any platform will have, reduced it to 26%, right? Now, what's your take on it? Whether we want the logistic arrangements to be independent completely, or whether we will like e-commerce platform to handhold so that this single item entries, you enable them to use it. And third most important is we also make e-commerce platform responsible for refunds and returns. So under that scenario, you as a logistic experts, what's your take on it?
Thank you very much. I think it's an excellent question. And my answer to that is, it depends on the context, the product, and the seller. To illustrate and walk through a few examples, and as Abhijit was mentioning, I think the big USP of the e-commerce platforms is that they have these algorithms that can very nicely match anticipated demand with inventory. So to walk through a example in India, for example, Amazon might have an excellent idea about the kind of winter clothing that American consumers would want, and then work with small Indian sellers to agglomerate that kind of inventory, then transport it in bulk across the border, warehouse it in a location close to the American market, and as and when the sales actually happen, then deliver it to the door of the consumer. Now, the economies of scale that Amazon can achieve through this process and drive the cost down is impossible for a single seller, a small seller in India to do. So this is brilliant. So it is something that is desirable in this context. But let's assume that you have a more high value, more bespoke product where you don't ship the good until and unless the sale has actually been made. For such products, typically the seller will be more comfortable working with an independent logistics supply provider. So let me extend that, the question that you had, madam, to include the large logistics supply providers in the ambit. So the facilitation that small players or even mid-sized players would like is either strong engagement and management from the platforms themselves or from a large logistics supply provider. Even Amazon would be using, in many cases, another large third-party logistics supply provider in this case. But to add perspective to this, and taking from the question you talked about the returns and all of that, that is a issue about accountability. And that takes us back to also the regulatory perspective. Because e-commerce, and we can come back to this in more detail later, has also opened up significant regulatory challenges of how do we manage this cross-border supply chain. And from a regulatory perspective, definitely the regulators would want either the large platforms or large logistics supply providers to have much greater visibility of the supply chain so they can drive accountability through it.
Absolutely, absolutely right. So one thing which is bothering is, if we want MSMEs to enter, we need a much more hand-holding by these e-commerce platforms. There is an e-commerce platform which established its complete net, and the distributor chain were up in arms against it. So all of you must have read about it. So it is going to happen. That is a transformation where we are heading to. That is a change that is happening, where these distribution expertise will get agglomerated together. It will get aggregated together, and that is how it will move. Mr. Kamra, I come back to you that MSME, because India with 65% youth that we have and employment. And during COVID, now coming with the core sectors and talking to core sectors and everything, automation is happening. That is one major decision all companies took, is wherever possible shift to automation. Now, with this kind of a chain, and even MSMEs are going to go for automation, but number of MSMEs will increase. So MSME is very important in India to have qualitative, sustainable employment zones. How do you think e-commerce platforms, I'm talking platforms, can play a role to encourage these MSMEs, SMEs, to board the e-commerce platform and then explore the market, expand the market, and become sustainable?
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think it's a great question, very pertinent. I think we need to evaluate every step of the MSME's journey and pursue how the entry barrier can be reduced leveraging technology, I feel. If I were to take a few examples, if you think about an MSME's journey, let's say there's an MSME based out of a tier 3 town in India who aspires to build a cross-border business, export business, or a domestic business using e-commerce. The first thing is awareness. How are we, as an ecosystem, making this individual or this enterprise aware of the opportunity, that how easy is it to build a business using e-commerce? So, and then how can we partner, whether it is platforms like Amazon, government through the vast ecosystem they have, like export promotion councils, drive that awareness and education. Once that's done, the second part is how do we make it easy for them to access it? Now, that manifests in a few different ways. How can we work on technology products which work on low bandwidth, for example? For example, our seller site now works on low bandwidth because we realize that there's a lot of MSMEs who want to participate in building a business. But if in their area, the internet bandwidth, the network that they use, it's 3G or even 4G, the network bandwidth's low, how will they ever get access? A different dimension of access is linguistics. We are a country where we have so many vernacular languages. It's very difficult to expect that everybody is going to be well versed in English. So how do you use technology? How do you use machine learning to talk the language that MSMEs speak? So another initiative we did was we vernacularized our technology platform so that if somebody speaks Hindi, now they can export in Hindi. On the other side, the consumer is going to buy in Japanese, right? So how do you do a reverse machine translation so that now Hindi converts to English and English converts to Japanese, while the MSME doesn't have to do any heavy lifting because that's not going to scale. Similarly, the example I took on supply chains, if again we talk about this lady entrepreneur who's based somewhere hypothetically in West Bengal who wants to export the daris that she makes, it'll be very difficult to expect that she's going to go book a container for herself. It's going to be up to the ecosystem and people like Amazon that how can we contract containers and then offer it to them at a competitive, easy to use way so that they use it for that one dari that they want to export to Japan now. So I feel that at every step, we need to take a step back, evaluate that what are the things that are getting in the way of truly democratizing exports or even commerce in India, and then use technology to solve for them so that our MSMEs focus on what they do best, which is create good quality products. And all the other heavy lifting is taken care by technology.
Absolutely right, because if you look at the China's example of trans-village industry, You know, they literally made an expertise and used e-commerce platform to spread and create market across the globe. And standardization, capturing market, immediate feedback, research being a part of the manufacturing chain so that you do the corrections in your assembly line immediately. And India is also talking about one district, one product kind of planned process. So, having said that, that e-commerce is important. I will come back with a second question to you, Mr. Kamra. That having said that e-commerce is important and the future way of the market, because that the consumer is the boss, and consumers' choice is now shifting to e-commerce. What are the pain points in policy that the government says make in India, government says we want to enhance exports, but too many departments, like, is it that too many cooks we are spoiling the broth? Are they contradicting each other, or there are serious pain points that needs to be addressed in the policies?
I think, ma'am, first of all, I think I would acknowledge that the government's actually, it's quite heartening to see that the government's actually taken cognizance of this very young channel and industry. And over the last 24 months, I think there's been specific steps which have simplified things or increased access. Examples of that would be IEC automation. Now, everybody who has to export from our country needs an IEC code. It was an offline, laborious process. Now it's completely automated, instant. Similarly, access has been difficult. So for logistics, we had 3 foreign post offices. Now that number's grown to 30. So I think there are concrete steps that have been taken. But at the same time, I do feel there is headroom for improvement. And again, I go back to the framework, which is at every point where the MSME is at a decision point, are there opportunities to simplify things? Some of these will be done by technology. Some of these could be done by procedural and policy simplification. Examples of this could be, I think Preetham talked about it, returns, right? In any transaction, returns has to be factored in. Right now, our policies are cumbersome when it comes to returns. Those could be simplified. We have a very vast network of export promotion councils across the length and breadth of our country. How can we leverage those to drive awareness, education about the export opportunity? There is opportunities to simplify the compliance burden around cross-border remittances. And I feel digital payments is a great example. And we were talking about it over coffee. It's a great example of how the government, through forward-looking technology-led measures, has created a very, very level playing field. And I feel in the same vein, if we were to look at our export policies and simplify them, it's going to be a game changer for exports from our country.
Absolutely, absolutely right. Because maybe e-commerce and gaming, these are the two things which may reduce the digital divide, which will expose people even in the hinterland to get digitally boarded into and being aware of what is happening. Now, coming Preetham to you, that you are a logistic expert, and there are regulatory concerns and the cross borders, e-commerce things, what we are doing. And these regulatory concerns, like on one breath, we are talking that we want to enhance the exports, and there is no alternative than e-commerce today. So how do we go about it? What are these challenges we are facing, and what are the corrections you suggest need to be done?
Thank you for that question. I think Abhijit touched upon a few of these aspects. I think there is no doubt in the minds of governments globally that this is a change that has come to stay, and we have to adjust to this new mode of trading. So if I may take the regulator's perspective for a few minutes to explain what are their concerns, and then talk about the potential solutions that are being discussed right now. So what are the regulator's concerns really? The main concern is actually not very different from the traditional trade, right? The regulator is concerned about what the product is, that's crossing borders. Is it contraband, illegal, banned substance, etc. It's concerned about the value of the product, the transaction value, because your taxes and duties will be applied based on that value and the product classification. And it's concerned about whether or not that product will harm your citizens, the product quality is good, consumer safety. The fourth large bucket is intellectual property rights because there are violations around that. So this is the broad gamut of issues that regulators are concerned with. Now let's take the point that Abhijit made about returns. There are issues about documentation, etc., verifying whether what went out is what's coming in or is something else is smuggled in. So the regulator's concerns are legitimate. That's the concern part. The good news is that e-commerce is the most digitalized aspect of trade, as we are discussing. So what the conversation that's happening not just in India but globally in forums like the World Customs Organization, in the UPU, the United Postal Union, which looks at the postal channel, is that how do we use the information available digitally to facilitate and make this trade very smooth? So for example, the ecosystem has the e-commerce platforms with their invoicing and their know your customer onboarding of the seller and the buyer. They're already aware of accountability on perhaps the intellectual property. It could be enforced even cross-border. Because you're selling something digitally, the payment is being made digitally, you can be made aware of what the transaction price is in a very credible way. So you have all this credible data. The question is, how do you break these silos and make this data available in a manner that is useful to the regulators? So what then they can do is pinpoint risk. Because you see, the big challenge today for the regulator is this. In the traditional trade, you had large consignments largely crossing borders. Now you have hundreds of small shipments. The manpower has not increased. To scrutinize with the same level this huge number of shipments is literally impossible. It's not something that they can sustainably do. So they are very credibly looking for solutions. And the solution lies in that tech. Sharing this data in a credible way, at the same time ensuring that commercial sensitive things are not data privacy is maintained, etc. But that's the way we are headed. And once we get to that point, in countries like the US, for example, it's already working to an extent. In the US, you have 99.99% clearance without any scrutiny. Only 0.01% actually gets stopped. So it's a very smooth system. And I think if you look at the National Trade Facilitation Action Plan, the NTFAP that we are moving in the same direction too. So I think I am quite positive that in a few years we'll see real difference in India as well.
Yeah, before asking you to expand on the technology, I'll just like to add two more pain points, which I think maybe you coming from business were a bit hesitant to say so. First of all is to treat e-commerce as a platform. It is as good as a brick and mortar shop. This is a platform. You can't have an onus of what is being packaged and delivered on the platform. Similarly, you can't have an onus of a bad quality on the platform. But having said that, they have to have a mechanism of having a digital footprint, and they have a mechanism of refund, grievance redressal as we are moving ahead. So maybe it is very important when we are making policies and there are too many departments involved into it. So when we have too many departments, harmonization is very important, and it is equally important to have one lead department so that the confusion is erased and we are able to move ahead, and this is happening. The good thing is, having learned the lessons and the speed at which it is expanding, the harmonization between commerce, DPIT, MIT is taking place, even tax laws, even consumer affairs. They are all now coming on board so that they will be able to deliver it better, and it's an opportunity not to be lost as we are concerned. So, Preetham, I'd like to ask you about the role that technology can play into all these various stages of a small company manufacturing to exposing themselves and getting a feedback and then tracking and then transactions in the digital payment modes. How do you suggest technology needs a much more maybe deep dive as we are going, and whether it may be a good idea to adopt or it may be a good idea to have our own norms for it?
That's a very complicated and difficult question. Thank you for putting me in the spot, madam. But to give you an honest answer, and this is my opinion and I stand to be corrected. To answer the second part of your question first, I don't think individual countries setting the norms would be an efficient way, because you're essentially looking at a cross-border network, and this network is going to get even more enmeshed in multi-country. So just to give you one example, we are talking about the fulfillment model where you have warehousing close to the market concern. Now, Take the US example. For me, the cheapest warehouse might not be serving my Texas market in US itself. I can do it across the border in Mexico, have a cheaper warehouse. So I move goods from India, put it in the, and then so I am crossing border twice. So how many different standards do you then bring into this game? So I don't think it's possible to do it in, having individual countries driving different standards. To go back to your earlier question, ma'am, I think Abhijit already answered that question. Already a lot of that is happening. You see, the entire transaction, when it's happening on e-commerce, you are using some platform or the other. Sometimes all together in one place or in different places. The payment portal is involved, the e-commerce platform is involved. And now, even your clearances in regulatory space is mostly digital. Even customs has their online, IEC is online. So the entire gamut of it is online. I think the challenge is that in many cases they exist in silos, and therefore the full benefit of having this comprehensive digital system is not being felt. You still have these small transactions that take place because you have to migrate from one silo to the other, which is adding complication and transaction cost, especially for the MSMEs. The question is, how do we break these silos down? The technology for it exists. It takes a little bit of innovation, and it will take a little bit of political will to drive this reform. And I think what is interesting is some of the smaller countries are actually at the innovative edge of this.
Very, very rightly said. Because many a times what happens, like today, I think in a digital world, we are battling with the regulatory bank, RBI's directions of PAPG. Right. So now, whether the consumers are comfortable with it, whether the platforms are comfortable with it, whether banks are ready for it. So all these things are coming. So are we keeping the cart before the horse is the challenges we face. And why I'm flagging these issues is that it is very important to have a holistic approach whenever we are thinking of e-commerce, because one action has a ripple effect into the other side of it as we move ahead. I think we have time for a couple of questions. We can go ahead with it. And some our online friends who are watching are also here. So I'll touch upon them, but I can have from audience if somebody wants to ask the panelist or you need a clarification. Otherwise, I'll start picking from here. So maybe I'll first pick from online. Abhijit, for you, there is a question. One way to secure supply chain might be to designate certain products as critical so that government can regulate their export and end use. What impact might this have on global trade?
Just so that I got the spirit of the question right. So the suggestion is that to avoid disruptions of certain products, classify them as critical. I think largely that's the prerogative of the nations, because at the end of the day, let me take an example. During COVID, we needed a lot of PPE equipment in our country. So it would have been very difficult for the government to allow exports of that, despite commercial interests of MSMEs. So sometimes I think it is the prerogative of the government to decide what's in the larger national interest. At other times, I think supply and demand takes over and goods move efficiently.
Absolutely right. Preetham, there's a question for you. To thwart the next major disruption, should countries come up with voluntary standards that companies can adhere to, such as having the tag of secure, which would imply that the product would be available in the country where it is designated secure? So sort of a self-declaration mode.
I think we will move to some form of this, but we already have something like the AEO, the Authorized Economic Operator, which is a trusted trader. Now, why I find this very interesting is that in the digital space, you are actually building digital history of transactions. We already, as consumers, use this. We look at the feedback that a seller gets on Amazon and look at the credibility of that seller. So in some sense, combining that feedback loop and creating this trusted trader network, extending it to an extent where regulators also start looking at similar frameworks to facilitate trade would be the natural next step to go. And that's the big disruption I think that will happen next.
Absolutely right. Then there is a question which any one of you can take after I make one initial comment. What role can blockchain play in promoting greater efficiency and accountability in supply chains. I think that's the next step. The entire database is going to shift to the blockchain where nobody can mess around with it. Plus, you maintain it, and data files will disappear where you can't manipulate the data. So I think that is a future, but either of you, if you want to add
I'll
on.
just build on what Preetham talked about, which was that I think there's a need for a coordinated effort and harmonization across the world. I think it's going to be broken into two parts. One is going to be political intent. The other is the capability. I think blockchain is going to be the capability answer, and then intent, I think, will follow.
I think Abhijit has said what I was going to say, so thanks.
Right. Then there is one more question. Does a focus in creating global supply chains end up harming the local small businesses?
If I can take that, I think that is absolutely not true.
Not true.
I mean, globally, we have always traded. If an entrepreneur has a larger market to address, there is absolutely no harm. Everybody will have to be competitive at the end of the day. So,
See, protectionist policy are coming. The world is becoming a little bit protectionist, for which we have WTO compliant kind of countervailing duties or other things. So all these tools, you can use it. But then the best will survive in the market. How China captured the world market. I think building material here, starting from roof to chandelier to chair, table, I think I can be bet upon it that it's all come from China. So they have captured the entire building material across the globe. So that is where your economy of scale, your competence, quality, standardization is going to rule the roost. And India has gained in export markets besides agri products. Like I mentioned before, in textiles, we have gone ahead in a very big way. So these are the places where you go, and into the metals you are going in a very big way. And India itself is a huge market, which I say that for an MSME, to have a break even, if they capture India market, it will give you a break even. It will give you the basic profits, and then you can go for it.
if I just want
please.
5 seconds, I think the debate is about free versus fair trade.
Yeah.
I think having the rules of the game, free trade is great.
You're right. Absolutely right. Any other question or query?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I'm Dr.
Yeah, the
Deepak Singh.
light is
and-
coming.
yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't spot you.
Yeah, it's okay. I come from RH in Kyoto, and I have a question, mainly two questions. First is up to you, madam. When we look from the government, from the public policy perspective, we have to look into from the basis of philosophy. What is the philosophy? Prime Minister has a good philosophy about self-reliance, make India, startup India. But then we have to look into the content and also the control. So some of the online viewer member has already mentioned that what is the, but what about content? How we are discussing that what content we will be addressing. So when I come to the question of content, then to both the speakers, one is looking into the market of Asia Pacific, investment of ADB, and how you want to make the markets resilient and all that. But Amazon, they have to look into the market or Indian problems in a different manner. For instance, we see this parali and stubble burning. It has an absolute raw material market. And through the perspective of machine learning and all, Amazon can do lots of things where farmer can be provided incentive for collection. And logistics and value chain can collect it and send it to. For instance, there is a Kriya lab in IIT Delhi which develops disposable cups and plates from these raw materials. Then ADB can also fund that. So we have to look into the content of non-traditional system, not only to disrupt the already existing system, but also to create a value to new system. So what I want to know from Amazon's perspective, what you are planning in this area, and from ADB's perspective, and also from you, madam, that how we are going to handle this content and control. Thank you.
Absolutely. You have to understand very clearly the main objective which the government has categorically set so of Atmanirbhar and enhancing export and creating jobs should be written in bold letters. And every policy has to refer it back that are you facilitating it or are you creating hindrances into it. And control has to be to the level where you don't see an exploitation. So in the sense, you have to see a control of the immediate payment systems, whether there is a delay, whether there is a disharmony into placing their products, or if they are separating from their own products vis-a-vis which are not their own products. So all these things can come under the control factors. And of course, the concerns where we have to ban the export sometimes, depending on the demand and supply within the country, or because of some non-legal kind of transactions that may happen, that control will come. But that does not mean the rest of the business has to be a free play. It is very important, because if you try to get into it, you will harm the MSMEs, you will harm creating jobs, because there is no vacuum in the market. If we don't enter the market, Philippines will enter, Indonesia will enter. China, of course, is the front runner into the whole thing. So this is how it is going to operate upon. So therefore, your control has to be only walk that much, and that restraint we have to follow in this. It is very, very important, because we can't, in the recent judgment of the Supreme Court on crypto, when it was banned, they touched on the constitutional on proportionality. Like the kind of apprehensions you have, or the kind of damage you think of, is your regulation, is your control proportion to that, right? So the cases of damage, what we are getting is in decimals. So for decimal, I can't have a control. For decimals, we have to have a redressal systems. That is important.
I think from an e-commerce operator perspective, I feel it's going to be transparency and enablement. I think those are going to be the two themes. Transparency in a way, so if I were to illustrate using the two examples you took. So for example, farm produce, right? So what we're doing currently is we're doing exactly what you talked about, which is use machine learning, use tunnel vision to help with the gradation of produce, right? That makes it a little bit more empirical versus the farmer being at the whims and the fancies of the person who's buying it from them, right? So that makes it transparent. That allows them to get the right due for their produce. And then is the enablement dimension. Now, after you assess that produce transparently and empirically, how can you connect it to consumers across the country and across the world efficiently so that they can also realize what's due to them? So I feel I could extend that to all the examples that you took, but I feel that that's going to be the role that e-commerce operators will play to transform these opportunities.
And very quickly, I think all the building blocks exist, right? You have a very open, dynamic market for venture capital. So, people who have good ideas to convert the waste into products, or many other examples like that, it exists. It's about then having the facilitation of the infrastructure to take it to the gateway ports, etc., to export it out, and have e-commerce players who will facilitate that transaction. So all the building blocks exist. Institutions like the ADB, they work very closely with government on the infrastructure aspect as well as on the regulatory reforms aspect. So all of the building blocks exist. It is now about the entrepreneurial spirit that can come up, and whether or not, as Madam said, that the regulations, the ecosystem that we have, is it enabling to the entrepreneur or not? I think that is the key question, and I think we are getting there. I think the entire point of Atmanirbhar Bharat and all of these initiatives is the enablement of the Indian entrepreneur, however small he or she might be. And if we achieve that goal, I think we are already there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other question, or I think we are crossing the time, right? All right. So thank you so much, Mr. Kamra, Mr. Preetham, and everybody, and those online and offline present here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.